And in that moment, standing in the middle of my brother's wedding reception with 200 people staring at me, I pulled out the folder I had carried in my purse all evening and set it on the table in front of my mother. She looked at it like it was a bomb. It was. From the outside, my life looks put together. I'm 31. I have a decent apartment in Columbus, a steady job in accounting at a mid-sized logistics firm. A rescue cat named Biscuit who knocks things off shelves at 3 in the morning. I meal prep on Sundays. I call my mom every week. I show up. That last part, I show up, that's the part nobody ever talks about. They just expect it. My name is Ren, and I have been showing up for my family since I was 19 years old, quietly, without a single word of acknowledgement, while my older brother Callum got to be the star of every room he walked into. I want to be clear about something before I go any further. I don't hate my brother. I don't think I ever did. What I hated was the system that my parents built around him, the invisible architecture of our family, where his name was always said with pride, and mine was said like a footnote. And Ren also came to dinner. Like I was the +1 in my own family. Growing up, Callum was the kind of kid adults loved. He was loud in a charming way, good-looking in a way that made teachers grade him easier, naturally athletic. He played baseball through high school, got a partial scholarship to a state school in Indiana, came back 4 years later with a business degree and a confidence I'd never seen earned, but was somehow already there. My parents talked about that degree at every family gathering for 2 years after he graduated. 2 years. I graduated summa cum laude from Ohio State with a degree in accounting and a minor in finance. My mother said, "That's great, honey," and then asked if Callum had called me about Thanksgiving plans. I'm not exaggerating. I wish I were. When I was 22 and just starting my first real job, my parents sat me down at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd done homework for 12 years, and my father told me they were struggling. The property taxes on the house had gone up. My mother had cut back her hours at work because of her knees. They were behind on the second mortgage they'd taken out when Callum needed money to get his business idea off the ground. That business idea, by the way, lasted about 8 months and produced nothing except a logo and a lot of dinners my parents paid for. My father looked at me with tired eyes and said, "You're the responsible one, Ren. We know we can count on you." I thought that was a compliment. I was 22. I didn't understand yet that being called the responsible one in a family like mine isn't a compliment. It's an assignment. I started sending them $600 a month. I told myself it was temporary, just until they got back on their feet, just until the property tax situation stabilized, just until my mother's hours picked back up. That was 9 years ago. The number I've written down, because I'm an accountant, I track everything, is $94,400. That is the total amount of money I have transferred to my parents' accounts over the last 9 years. Not borrowed. Transferred. There was never a single conversation about repayment. There was never a contract. There was barely a thank you. There was just the expectation, delivered with the same quiet certainty as the sun rising, that Ren would handle it. And for 9 years, Ren did. Meanwhile, Callum moved into a new apartment every 2 years, always nicer than the last. He bought a truck. He went to Nashville for a bachelor party that my parents casually mentioned cost a few $1,000s per person, and somehow didn't register that I was standing right there, nodding along, having just sent them $800 the previous Friday because the water heater had gone out. I'm not saying Callum knew. I want to be honest about that. I'm not certain what he knew and what he didn't. What I am certain about is that nobody in my family ever sat him down at the kitchen table and told him that his little sister had been quietly keeping the lights on. The first time I almost said something was 3 years ago. My parents called me on a Tuesday evening, both of them on the phone at the same time, which they only do when something is serious. My father explained that they were behind on the mortgage, the main mortgage, not the second one, and that they needed $3,200 to avoid a late fee and a mark on their credit. I sat on my kitchen floor after I hung up. I didn't cry. I just sat there with my back against the cabinet and looked at my savings account balance on my phone and thought about the vacation I had been saving for. Italy. I'd wanted to go to Italy for 5 years. I transferred the $3,200 the next morning and rebooked to the Italy trip for someday. Someday still hasn't come. The second time I almost said something was when my parents came to visit me in Columbus 2 years ago. I had made dinner, cleaned my apartment, bought good wine. My mother walked in, looked around, and said, "It's cozy." Then she spent most of dinner telling me about Callum's new apartment in Cincinnati, the exposed brick, the rooftop, the granite countertops, and how proud they were that he was really coming into his own. I poured myself another glass of wine and said, "That's great. If it were you, could you have sat there and smiled?" I've asked myself that question so many times. And where are you listening to this story from, by the way? I've found that people who grew up as the invisible sibling understand this instantly. You'll know exactly what I mean when I say that I had mastered the art of making my feelings take up no space at all. But something shifted in me about a year before the wedding. I got a promotion, a real one. Senior accountant, with a bump in salary that meant I was now earning more than I ever had. I took myself to dinner to celebrate, alone at a nice restaurant downtown with a glass of champagne and a steak, and I sat there and thought, I have been giving away the best years of my financial life to people who have never once asked me how I'm doing. I didn't stop sending money immediately. I'm not wired that way. But I started keeping records, printed bank statements, highlighted in yellow, organized by year in a manila folder that I kept in my filing cabinet between my tax returns and my car insurance documents. I don't know exactly when I decided I would use it someday. I think some part of me just knew. Callum got engaged to his girlfriend Mara in the spring. She's perfectly nice. I want to say that. This isn't about her. The wedding was set for September, a big venue outside of Cincinnati, the kind with a barn that isn't actually a barn but is decorated to look like one. My parents were thrilled. My mother called me 4 times in 1 week about the centerpieces. 2 months before the wedding, my parents called again, together, Tuesday evening, which by now I recognized as their serious call formation. The venue required a final payment. They had promised to cover part of the rehearsal dinner as the groom's parents. They were short. Would I be able to help? Just this once, to make Callum's day special? The number they needed was $2,600. I said I would think about it. That was the first time I had ever said that. Every previous time, I had said yes within 24 hours. I think the pause scared my mother a little because she called me again the next day to check in, which is not something she normally does. I transferred the $2,600, but I also updated my folder. The wedding day was beautiful, genuinely. The venue was everything my mother had described. Mara looked stunning. Callum cried when she walked down the aisle, which surprised me, and for a moment I let myself just be a sister at her brother's wedding. Happy for him, glad to be there. The reception is where things changed. We were about an hour in. Dinner had been served. The toast had happened. My father had given a speech about Callum that went on for 7 minutes and included the phrase, "everything we raised him to be." I counted the minutes because I had a lot of feelings to manage, and counting was easier than feeling them. Then my aunt, my father's sister, Georgette, who has never once been accused of reading a room, leaned across the table to my mother and said, loudly enough for our whole table to hear, "You must be so proud. He really turned out wonderful. You two raised such a remarkable son." My mother beamed. Then Georgette looked at me, seemed to remember I existed, and said, "And Ren, dear, you work in numbers, right? Accounting or something?" "Yes," I said. "That's practical," she said, in the tone people use when they mean boring, and turned back to my mother. And my mother laughed. A small, agreeable laugh, like Georgette had said something charming. She didn't correct her. She didn't say, "Ren is actually very accomplished." She just laughed and went back to talking about the centerpieces. Something in me went very still. I reached down and picked up my purse off the floor. I felt the weight of the folder inside it. I had not planned to use it that night. I want to be honest about that. I had not driven to Cincinnati with the intention of making a scene at my brother's wedding. But I also think some part of me had known when I slid that folder into my purse that morning that 9 years is a long time to be silent. I set the folder on the table. My mother looked at it. "What is that?" "Bank statements," I said. 9 years of them." The table got quiet. My father, who had been talking to my uncle 2 seats down, turned to look at me. "Ren," my mother said in the voice she used when I was 12 and had done something she disapproved of. $94,400, I said. I kept my voice even. "I am an accountant. I work with numbers under pressure for a living. That is the total amount of money I have transferred to your account since I was 22 years old." Property taxes, mortgage payments, the water heater, the car repair, the rehearsal dinner. I slid the folder toward the center of the table. It's all in there, highlighted. My father's face had gone through about 4 different expressions in the span of 5 seconds. He landed on confused. What? What are you talking about? We never asked you for. Dad, I said. Just that one word. And something in my voice must have been different from every other time I had spoken to him in the past 9 years, because he stopped. You called me, I said. In February 4 years ago, you needed $3,200 for the mortgage. I have the text message. You called me in October 3 years ago because the furnace needed to be replaced. I have that text message too. You called me 2 months ago about the rehearsal dinner. I transferred $2,600 on a Thursday morning at 8:47 a.m. I tapped the folder. I have the confirmation number. The table was completely silent. Georgette had gone pale. My mother was staring at the folder like she was hoping it would disappear. We always intended to, my mother started. I didn't ask for a plan, I said. I'm not asking for anything tonight. I'm not here to ruin the wedding. Callum and Mara deserve a beautiful night, and I genuinely mean that. I looked at my brother, who was across the room, oblivious, laughing with his groomsmen. I just needed you to know that I know, and that I'm done pretending I don't. I picked up my purse. I left the folder on the table. Then I stood up and walked to the bar and ordered a club soda with lime and stood there for a moment with my heart hammering in my chest and my hands completely steady, because when you have been holding something for 9 years, setting it down doesn't make you collapse. It makes you lighter. My mother found me 20 minutes later. She looked shaken in a way I had never seen on her before. My mother is a woman who has always moved through the world with a particular kind of certainty. She knows how things should be and she arranges them accordingly. She was not certain right now. Why didn't you ever say anything? She asked. And I thought about all the ways I could answer that. I thought about every Tuesday evening phone call. Every "you're the responsible one." Every time Callum's name was said with that particular warmth that my name never got. Because I kept thinking you would notice on your own, I said. And then I stopped waiting. She tried to tell me that they had always appreciated me, that they had just never been good at showing it, that things with Callum were complicated in ways I didn't understand. And I listened. I let her say all of it. And then I said, I hear you, and I still need things to be different going forward. I did not go back to the table that night. I found a quiet spot near the venue's back patio, and I watched the lights strung across the ceiling through the window, and I let myself feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not anger. Not relief, exactly. Something quieter than both of those. My father came to find me about an hour later. He sat down next to me without saying anything for a minute. My father has always been a man of very few words when words cost him something. Finally, he said, I didn't realize how much it had added up to. I know, I said. That's not an excuse. I know that too. He nodded. We sat there for a while longer and watched the lights through the window. Inside, the DJ was playing something with a lot of bass, and I could see the silhouettes of people dancing. Are you okay? He asked eventually. It was such a simple question. It was the first time that I could remember that he had asked me that without it being connected to whether I could help with something. I'm getting there, I said. In the weeks after the wedding, things were uncomfortable. That's the honest word for it, uncomfortable, not destroyed. My mother called me more than usual, which felt like an attempt at something, even if neither of us had the language for it yet. My father sent me a text one Sunday that just said, I want to make things right, I'm not sure how. I saved that text. Callum found out eventually. He called me on a weeknight, and he sounded genuinely rattled, which I hadn't expected. He said he hadn't known, and I believed him, the way you believe someone when the shock in their voice is too specific to be performed. He said he didn't know what to say. I told him he didn't have to say anything yet, that we could figure it out over time. I don't know what the money situation looks like going forward. My parents and I have had one real conversation about it, careful and halting, and they've acknowledged that what happened wasn't fair. Whether fairness eventually translates into something concrete, repayment, a plan, something on paper, I genuinely don't know yet. I'm not holding my breath, but I'm not closing the door either. What I do know is this. I am 31 years old. I have $94,400 worth of reasons to understand exactly how much I am worth. And the worth was never in the number. The worth was in the fact that for 9 years I showed up. Not because I was praised for it. Not because anyone was watching, but because I thought that was what love looked like. I've had to rethink that. Love that only flows in one direction isn't love. It's a system. And I opted out of the system on a Saturday evening in September, in a barn that wasn't actually a barn, wearing a blue dress and carrying a folder full of highlighted bank statements. On the drive home from Cincinnati, I stopped at a rest stop somewhere on I-71 and sat in the parking lot with the engine running and the heat on low, and I looked up flights to Italy on my phone. Prices had gone up since I'd last checked, 5 years ago. Of course they had. I booked one anyway. Some things you stop waiting for. Some things you just go and get yourself. And some nights, standing at the bar of your brother's wedding reception with your heart hammering and your hands completely steady, you realize that you were never invisible. You just let yourself believe that you were. I don't believe that anymore. If you've ever been the one who always shows up, always sends money, always says it's fine, I want you to know that you are allowed to put the folder on the table. You are allowed to say, I know what I have given, and I know what I am worth, and those two things are not the same. That moment on the patio with my father, when he asked if I was okay and I said I was getting there, that was the truest thing I had said to anyone in years. I am getting there, slowly, imperfectly, with a lot of Sunday meal preps and one very opinionated rescue cat and a flight booked for April. I'm getting there. If this story found you somewhere in your own Tuesday evening, I hope it helped. And wherever you're listening from, I'm glad you're here. I've thought a lot about why it took me 9 years. Not in a self-critical way, I'm done with that. But in the way you think about something when you're finally far enough from it to actually see its shape. And what I see now is this. I was not weak. I was not naive. I was someone who had been taught very early and very thoroughly that love is demonstrated through sacrifice, and that asking for recognition is the same thing as being selfish. That's not a character flaw. That's a lesson. A wrong one, but a lesson nonetheless. The thing about lessons is that they have consequences. Not in some grand cosmic sense, just in the ordinary, cause and effect way that life works. I gave and gave without saying a word, and so the people around me concluded, reasonably, that giving without saying a word was something I was fine with. I taught them how to treat me. I didn't mean to, but I did. And I kept teaching them the same thing for 9 years. Every time I said yes on a Tuesday evening without hesitation. Callum didn't know. That matters. I've had to sit with that and really let it be true, because it would be easier in some ways if he had known and stayed silent. But he didn't. He just lived his life inside the family system the same way I did. He just happened to be on the receiving end instead of the giving end. Neither of us designed it. We just inherited it and didn't question it, and that is the most ordinary way that unfair things continue. What I did at that wedding wasn't revenge. I want to be clear about that because I know how it sounds. The folder, the highlighted statements, the number said out loud in a room full of people in formal wear. But I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I was trying to stop disappearing. There's a difference, even if the moment looked the same from the outside. Ren the responsible one. Ren who handles it. Ren who always figures it out. That version of me was built on silence. And silence, I've learned, doesn't keep the peace. It just delays the conversation and charges interest while it waits. The truer version of responsibility, I think, is this. You show up for people you love, and you also tell the truth about the cost of showing up. Both things, not just the first one. Strength without honesty isn't strength. It's endurance. And endurance alone, without anyone ever knowing what you're carrying, will hollow you out completely if you let it. I'm not hollowed out. I was getting there, but I caught it. That folder in my purse was not a weapon. It was 9 years of a person deciding she finally mattered enough to be seen. If you are the one who always shows up, the one who always figures it out, the one whose name gets said like a footnote, I want you to know that recognizing your own worth is not arrogance. It is the most basic form of intelligence there is. You cannot pour from a vessel you never refill. You cannot sustain love that only moves in one direction and call it a relationship. Put the folder on the table. Say the number out loud. Not to punish anyone, just to finally be real, in a room where you have been a shadow for far too long. I'm in Columbus. Biscuit knocked my water glass off the counter this morning at 6 a.m. I have a flight to Italy booked for April. I'm getting there. And honestly, that's enough.